Hello, I'm Thelma Golden, Director and Chief Curator of the Studio Museum in Harlem, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Roundtable for the Studio Museum in Harlem's 2019-2020 Artists in Residence exhibition. The Studio Museum's iconic Artists in Residence program gives emerging artists an unparalleled opportunity to develop their practice in an 11-month residency and offers audiences the chance to view this work in annual exhibitions and programs. This is the second year that the Studio Museum's annual Artists in Residence exhibition will take place at MoMA PS1 as part of an ongoing partnership between our two institutions and the Museum of Modern Art while we continue construction on our new home on 125th Street in the heart of Harlem. I could not be happier that we're able to gather in this virtual space. The Studio Museum is thankful to the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation's digital initiative and to Art Bridges, who have helped make the museum's digital programs possible. We are also grateful for the support provided by the Open Society Foundations to help realize the exhibition, This Longing Vessel, Studio Museum Artists in Residence 2019-2020. I also would like to share my deepest thanks to the numerous supporters of our Artists in Residence program. And now I must extend my heartfelt congratulations to E. Jane, Naudline Pierre, and Elliot Reed. Tonight we celebrate your incredible effort and beautiful and powerful work. Your vision, dedication to your practice, and unflagging commitment in an unprecedented year is the reason we are here tonight. And I cannot congratulate our incredible artists in residence without recognizing Legacy Russell, the Studio Museum's Associate Curator of Exhibitions, who has worked with each of our artists over the course of their residencies to arrive at this exciting culmination. I want to extend my deep, deep thanks to Kate Fowl, Director of MoMA PS1, and the entire teams at both MoMA PS1 and the Studio Museum. Your hard work and resolve over the course of this year has made this exhibition and tonight's program possible. Now I'd like to turn the program over to Legacy as we continue to celebrate this wonderful collaboration between artists and our two institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Thelma. And hello to all who are joining us this evening, near and far. It has truly been a year. It's been a year that has required real tenacity, grit, innovative thinking, and a willingness to collectively be radically open, honest, and vulnerable in the face of such great change in the world. This could not have been possible without such a phenomenal team. And so I'm going to take a moment just to recognize some of those team members. From the Studio Museum Curatorial and Exhibitions team, Yelena Keller, Curatorial Assistant, Eric Booker, Assistant Curator and Exhibition Coordinator, Gina Godemi, Registrar, Michaela Bailey and Angelique Rosales Salgado, Studio Museum and MoMA Curatorial Fellows, as well as Alana Bridges, Mellon Curatorial Fellow. From our comms team, we have Elizabeth Karp-Evans, our Director of Media and Communications, Amanda Thomas, Communications Manager, Destiny Forbes, Marketing Coordinator. From our Public Programs team, Dayan Huff, Director, Public Programs and Community Engagement, Cheyenne Marcano, Senior Coordinator, Public Programs and Community Engagement, Isabel Hui Saldana, Studio Museum and MoMA Curatorial Fellow for Public Programs, and last but not least, from the Studio Museum crew, Evans Richardson, Chief of Staff, and Jody Hennell, Director of Development. And all of us at Studio Museum want to take a moment, of course, as Thelma noted, to recognize the work of MoMA PS1. You all have been legendary collaborators who have brought to this partnership new heights and joys in this next chapter. Kate Fowl, Director of MoMA PS1, Josephine Graff, Assistant Curator, Taja Cheek, Associate Curator, Michael Henry, Director of Exhibitions, Richard Wilson, Exhibition and Production Designer, Joya Erickson, Registrar, Molly Kurzes, Director of Marketing and Communications, Victoria Reese, Eva Cruz, who is running our live cam that you can see, and deepest thanks to the rest of the incredible MoMA team, as well as Studio Museum team who have worked so closely on this project across our incredible institutions in the second year of this partnership. With practices spanning new media, performance, and painting, this exhibition, This Longing Vessel, troubles and excites ways of seeing, seeking new language for the building of extraordinary futures, and marks an exciting moment in Studio Museum's history. Naudline, Elliot, we are celebrating you for all you've brought to your work and this groundbreaking show that you are part of today. As we ease into the evening, I also want to take a moment to give a special shout out to those who are in the room as Studio Museum Artists in Residence alumnus, as well as to our incredible artist community and creative collaborators. You are what brings us to this work, the very essence of the museum's mission, and our presence here tonight is a celebration of each of you as part of the institution's heartbeat. We hope you'll stay tuned for future updates and programs with our 2021 cohort of artists in residence, Widleen Cadet, Texas Isaiah, Genesis Jerez, and Jacoby Satterwhite, and join us for the museum's first ever digital open studios on February 23rd, 2021 from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's been such a joy and honor to work closely and navigate this year together with such an incredible group of folks. To this end, I will pass the mic to one of our closest collaborators, Yelena Keller, to share some brief notes on the artists.
Thank you, Legacy, Thelma, and everyone in this virtual room for coming together and holding digital space for these three incredible artists, Naudline Pierre, Jane, and Elliot Reed. Naudline's vibrant paintings expand on a fictional world driven by an avatar of herself, through which she imagines a more expansive possibility for Black life. Jane utilizes video, photography, and ephemera to pay homage to the Black diva and create a space to celebrate and complicate our relationship to Black femmehood. Elliot's video and sculptural works challenge the fetishization of Black queer bodies, actively troubling the field of performance and the questions of power proposed therein. It is truly remarkable to be able to gather together in this way to celebrate your work and each of your practices across the course of this residency program, as it has certainly been no small feat to get here, and this moment is so deeply deserved. It has been my personal, deep joy, honor, and privilege to work with you three over the course of this incredibly challenging year. We have learned along the way from each of you through your practices the incredible strength and power that comes from the true dedication that you have to your vision, the fearlessness of your vulnerability and softness, and the care enacted through your work, and as well as humans to one another and in unison as you have worked collectively toward this moment. We are so grateful to you three for offering generous, thoughtful, challenging, expansive vision of Black existence, resistance, and possibility. We are so honored to be in this exhibition, to be held by this exhibition, and to hold it through and beyond this moment. We encourage everyone in the audience to read more about the artists and Legacy's beautiful curatorial essay after the program on Studio Museum and MoMA PS1's websites. And now, on to the program.
Thank you so much, Yelena. Now on to our conversation. We're going to start with, kind of maybe an overarching question, one that allows for each of you to respond. So I would love for us to maybe think about, as we consider the idea of this longing vessel, the notion of the proxy, as we see in your work, Elliot, to the avatar appears in your practices, Jane and Naudline. This feels like a right place to begin as we think about the ways in which these proxies or avatars perform or long and how that might take shape across each of your respective practices and contributions to this exhibition. Can you talk a little bit about this and maybe respond in kind?
I'll hop in. So yeah, first off, I just wanted to say what an honor it is to be a part of such an amazing cohort. I'm extremely grateful that we have this live video feed, but for anybody who's in New York or will be in New York by March, definitely come see the show because it looks better in person. But as far as answering the question, I would say that my work up until this point has definitely been centered on performance and sort of the live event. And there has been so many dead ends and challenges and sort of just impossible issues around working with having people gather in space involving COVID. So this work, sort of like the culmination of this residency, sort of allowed me to use my body as a proxy, like Legacy said, and sort of expand my practice as a performer and think of ways that I could be present in the room without being present. The camera's on my room right now, and you can see the brown color, which is actually an artwork called Hue. And Hue is a digital color scan of my right hand that's kind of like stretched across the walls of the space. So you can think of it sort of holding the objects in the room. But after having this experience, I want to keep going and do more objects. But yes, performing without a body, performing without a live space is kind of the question that I'm answering this year.
Thanks, Elliot. Naudline, what about you?
I think the avatar is so important to the work because this idea of creating a parallel universe somewhere else where this figure is experiencing things like at the same time as me, but in a different dimension, it allows for this sense of escape and fantasy that I need for my own survival. And so thinking about how to take that power to create a narrative for this character, plus the accessory characters, in this body of work especially, I think it's been super important for me to have that power in such a tumultuous year, to express those feelings of longing and but have that removed. So it's not me. Like this character shares like likeness and characteristics, but that's a whole other existence happening. And I love that because it gives me distance from the work and it allows me to create and feel powerful in that way.
E, what about you? I know that, for example, avatars are something that we've spoken often about. So you're doing this work this year. So maybe can you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about, one, the fact that the way that I'm thinking through the archive in this show, particularly through like the video piece, Let Me Be a Woman TM, thinking about how like Black women that are hyper visible and like hyper present through popular culture are already used by all of us in some ways as avatars, as we like project on their likeness. Like when you think about like reaction memes, using like figures from reality television, and figures that are just like present in the media. So I was thinking a bit about that and how the women in that video definitely speak to these sort of like longings around performance and this desire, but are also enacting their own desire. And with Misa, it's like it's so funny because she is an avatar in the sense that I feel like when I'm entering that space, she's something else, and I think that's expressed in the works. And like sort of like if you see in the choreography video in the installation, it's like with the behind the scenes, she's trying to figure out like how do I insert my body into this in these certain positions to give off this like diva energy, right? But it's also like she's as much of an avatar as she is almost like an alter, like I say alter ego a lot because it's almost like we're sharing a body, but we're doing different things with it. And like, what is that? I don't know. That's my feedback for now.
I love that. And I think that maybe it's a great way to pivot a little bit to talk, Naudline, a little bit about your work, because, you know, in the context of this exhibition, your paintings are really leaping from the walls. They take on a kind of persona and personality and their own really hold space. We see some of them literally leaning, some of them that outsize human scale. And then, of course, there's a jewel of a work being so small, but it really requires us to move our bodies to get super intimate with it in order to see it fully. So I'm wondering, you know, across E and Naudline, perhaps to think about this question of what necessary enclosures of Black womanhood are being responded to or created. In E's case, you've created obviously a space in itself that kind of operates as an enclosure installation. But Naudline, you know, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that in terms of your paintings, and to maybe across all three of you to think a bit about the ways in which refusal or opacity take shape and form.
One thing that I was thinking so heavily about in making this work was opacity and the right to being illegible. I think that the Black experience, Black women's pain, joy, love, lust, it's all up for the grabbing in popular culture and just like the history of the world. And I felt like in this moment, I wanted people to have to work to get to the images. And so having some of those paintings leading at that like 30-degree angle, kind of thwarting the viewer's experience was really important for me. I wanted to have control over how the works were going to be seen. So on that wall where the paintings are leaning, that was like my attempt at calling back to this sort of salon style hanging of the work and really thinking about that context and taking this new kind of other place into that context, but also being like, if you're going to engage with this work, you're gonna have to work to see it. And you may not understand it and it may not be for you, but that's the intent. So thinking about what notes I can leave in the work for people who can tap in, and creating that sort of space, this other world where Black femmes, women identifying people can go and experience things freely in a way that's kind of concealed and not as digestible as I think people would want. That's what I was really thinking about with the installation of the work. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. I mean, in I know Black femmehood takes a particular form and shape, right? Both within Misa, who you've defined, in a certain way as being an underground pop star for the cyber resistance. So, I'm wondering if maybe you can chat a little bit about the large scale poster of Misa that's in the exhibition space, and maybe the ways in which Misa's presence engages certain types of refusal or opacity in terms of a kind of critical narrative.
Sure. Yeah. So just to start to talk about the poster is based on a photograph that El Press took during a performance that I did at the Kitchen in 2019, performing work, some work that's on Misa's new album. And then I was thinking a lot about this like Brandy poster that I have from like a Word Up magazine. It's like archival. It's not even mine. It's someone's auntie's Brandy's poster. And sort of like just like wanting to like give that energy of like the Word Up poster, but on this like mass scale. And really this photo I think does represent a lot of the refusal enacted on stage, because it's like a lot of the songs, there are songs that she performs that are just like R&B songs, and they're sweet and they're pretty, and there are moments on stage that kind of give that, and then there are moments on stage where I'm kicking and screaming and I'm angry, right? Because that's also there. And I think that's a thing that's really denied, like the diva. And like, what is it, I think there's the joy and a safety in being a certain type of underground, because you can act these certain gestures without a certain like above ground record label telling you can't do that, or like that's not the proper way to like behave. And so I really like to engage that. Yeah, I think, does that answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Elliot, I'm wondering to think a little bit about your space, because obviously the relationship across each of the rooms is so exciting. Each has its own sort of space, time too, and sonic frequency, but specifically to your room, right? I know that it is kind of a continuation of ongoing research and study that you have both, kind of progressed throughout the course of the residency, but also really in terms of your practice have brought to the residency. So I'm wondering if maybe it would be helpful to flesh out about what Elliot Reed Laboratories is, and how the structure of the lab, as potentially sterile and scientific and corporate, can come into contact with the lab as a kind of bodily site. Because that relationship in and of itself feels like, a really exciting, and volatile place and position, but also a kind of ripple and an opportunity too for a certain type of kind of critical engagement and dialogue.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for everybody watching, I am Elliot Reed, like a person. I'm also Elliot Reed, the artist, but I'm also Elliot Reed Laboratories, which is a corporation with only one employee, which is me. So I'm the founder, director, sole employee, but also I like sometimes hire people if I'm working with other outside forces. So this is actually like, as an artwork, Elliot Reed Laboratories was started in 2014. When I actually registered with the Library of Congress, I have a copyright that's like under that name. kind of as a way to conceptually grasp like the impossibility of owning performance. So this is something that sort of came with me from my practice into this residency, and also will continue afterwards, but trying to find a language or a method for sort of tracking the untrackable. And something that I'm really excited about all of our works in this show is that the way that we engage sort of body politic, or like bodily politic, I would say, to be more specific, because all of our works are sort of things that come from the flesh, but sort of like shift it in some way, whether it's in conversation with the digital, in conversation with like a fantasy or dream space, in conversation with just like death or erasure, and kind of like a combination of all of these things. So I guess specifically about this show, what I'm particularly proud of is sort of how I was able to sort of take the language of performance and translate it into something that can be held, videos, through objects, through image. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, you know, I know that you've spoken, Elliot, about this notion of performance as a tool, specifically thinking about, you know, the ways in which obviously your body can become a tool or an agent within your performances. But also, I know that within the course of the residency, you've really begun to push the limits in a really exciting way about how objects can be tools, and to the performance of objects. I know that you've spoken about kind of body work as alongside of the politics of objects. And, you know, can you talk a little bit about the life, and as well, conversely too, within the kind of remit of this particular presentation, the death of them, right? Kind of honoring that relationship and thinking about the tensions there.
Sure. So this project started as a research project, and I actually would like to thank a friend of mine, Aaron Brown, who's based in California, who's a PhD student right now, who a mentor of mine introduced me to. But we've been following this murder case, specifically around this man named Ed Buck, who's based in Los Angeles, who was like a gay white man based in West Hollywood, who would hire Black male sex workers. And sort of his fetish was injecting these men with methamphetamine to the point where they kind of became avatar, which is actually a language that I use when I'm writing about this real life case, because in my eyes, like this person's sort of like sexual fetish wasn't so much about like getting high with these people, but more so like rendering these humans, these Black people, these Black persons into objects. So that was sort of something that was happening in the real world, and is still happening now. Buck's trial hasn't happened yet, but coming from that, sort of researching the murders of Timothy Dean, Jamil Moore, I sort of started to relate that to the way that I feel Black bodies in pain are being trafficked across the internet. So I have like a love-hate relationship with contemporary media, whereas it's a beautiful and vital thing for news, you know, important information to be spread, but at the same time, like, how can, you know, 46 years of life be translated into an Instagram post? It's impossible. Or a hashtag, right? You know, we always have been and always will be more than just names or just pixels on a screen. And there's a bind, right? Like, as someone who wants to be politically involved, I feel a desire to want to stay up to date, but I also realize the impossibility of sort of capturing the true breadth of pain, and also the breadth of loss related to all of these kind of like deaths and losses. So that's sort of what's looming heavy in my space right now. Like right now, the camera's on this piece called End to End Encrypted, Lot's Wife, where basically it's my body weight in salt, and those are all of my clothes. But there was a performance, it's not visible, where I sang a love song to a long distance partner. And basically the idea behind the work is that like I looked back at like an impossible past, and sort of through this one last act of tenderness sort of like erased my physical form, and all that you're approaching in the gallery is sort of like the detritus, right? Which emotionally feels a lot similar to these continued coverages of like, you know, police killings, or sort of like, you know, trafficking victims, or any kind of loss that's sort of sent through the internet, right? It's like what's actually left behind when the original material is like so far from us, you know, through the phone or through the computer.
I so appreciate that. And also I appreciate you bringing into the room this question of tenderness. You know, I'm thinking too of intimacy. I know within the course of the residency, you began to film yourself rehearsing, and you are showing that actively within the installation, as we can kind of see in a mirrored image. And it's really incredible to engage with this work, largely because, you know, obviously it is all around us. It's something that we step into with you. And you really allow us to see you in this incredible tender moment, intimate moment of really becoming this pop star as a kind of persona, as well as an extension of yourself. So I'm wondering, you know, how does the presence or absence of different types of sound work for you? Because within, you know, one video, in the course of the installation, you have an incredible soundscape that runs alongside of kind of archival footage as you've pieced it together. And then, of course, within this part of the installation, you have yourself silently engaging with this act of practicing dance and also of kind of movement and gesture. Can you talk about the relationship between, you know, sound and silence?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually that's what I was gonna bring up before around opacity is like when I think about opacity, I think about control and I think about agency, right? And so when I deal with the Misa project, it's a very important question for me. It's like, how does Misa show up in the gallery? How does my voice show up in the gallery? How do our bodies show up in the gallery? And really the choice to not have sound in that video is because it, like you said, it is intimate. I'm talking with people in the room. I'm talking with the choreographer, Jumatatu Ko. I'm talking with Chukuma, my partner, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm practicing singing. There's no reverb, there's no effects. And it's like, you know, I kind of wanted to keep that intimacy private to us. Like I wanted it to be this opaque layer of like, that's not necessarily for the audience, but the audience does get to see like me becoming in this way and like this act of becoming and this performance of becoming. And in the Let Me Be a Woman video, it's like, yeah, I thought it was also lovely and interesting to have Summer Walker's voice be the only real musical presence. And then also with the, with Jennifer Holliday being this other like vocal presence in this room, these two like divas, one, you know, that's like a historical diva and one's like, you know, current up and coming. And like, what does it mean to let their vocals be the diva performance in the room in this way? So yeah, that's a bit about that.
I mean, Eve, it's such a, every time I walk into the room, hearing, you know, Elliot, your sort of soundscape as it becomes, right? And then we come into the room and see, obviously, the sound as tied to the presence of bodies, but also the absence of bodies, right? And then in Eve Jane, in your case, right, thinking about the presence of having these diva figures take on a voice and a space and really assert and hold space becomes a kind of spiritual presence almost. And we really are kind of bearing witness to that expansion, them taking up that room. I would love for you to think a little bit, and Naudline, to bring you into this as well, about this question of, you know, the figures we honor. And, you know, I know that you have Maxine as one of the neon works that is in the room, right? And so this is referencing, of course, the incredible Maxine Waters, who is the U.S. representative for California's 43rd Congressional District, and has just been a general badass, you know, through this time and before this time, and in, you know, kind of really being a champion for Black women. But, you know, within Naudline, within your work, we see a different type of kind of idolatry, a different type of kind of ritual presence and sort of spirituality that sets itself apart from being something specific to the religious, right? It almost is, you know, kind of more intersectional than that in terms of how you define it. So I was wondering if perhaps you could speak a little bit about, you know, your choice of Maxine in terms of paying homage to her alongside of these other incredible figures, divas and not. And then Naudline, for you to perhaps speak about the relationship between spirituality and religion in your work.
Sure, yeah, I can. Naudline, do you want to go first or I can start?
You can start.
Thank you. Yeah, so with and it's interesting because it's like Maxine's not a diva, right? But in some ways, she holds that role in the political realm, right? Oh my gosh. Because she speaks her mind. She's a senior. She's been doing it, and everything she does is hyper like like hyper surveilled and hyper critiqued, and she has to stand up under that pressure. Like even what she may not be a diva, but what she wears is somehow still commented on, you know, like it's this really weird relationship she has, which I also like love. And I chose to do this piece because I was at a time where, like, you know, I felt like I was at the capacity of what I could say politically and like what I could do, because I was terrified. Like in 2016 when Trump was elected, I was absolutely floored. I was absolutely terrified. I was like, I was shut in on myself, I think, by the news of something that felt impossible happening. Even though it felt inevitable, it was still quite a shock. And to, you know, wake up the day after his inauguration and see Maxine Waters kind of just like popping off, just like absolutely not. We're not going to have it. We're not going to have him do anything wrong. Like just holding him accountable constantly with what felt like no fear, I think made her someone that I wanted to hold up. And this project is actually, this is the first in a series of several neons that I'm going to be working on over, I think, quite a while. Just because of how long the process takes, dealing with Black women figures through the media who have been giving me the strength to open my mouth again and have a voice and feel safe speaking out. And another thing I can say is that the piece is called "You Are a Light Shining, Maxine Waters," and so it's like basically holding them up and saying like, you are this light, you are this almost like diva like figure, and there will be divas and non-divas in the series. So that's all I can say about that. Thank you for that question.
I love that, and it gives us kind of new rock stars to worship. So, you know, Naudline, we see some of those incredible presences across the different women who are in your room. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, that idea of worship, of idolatry, spirituality, religion?
Yeah, I'll start with the Guardians the very narrow, tall paintings that I started earlier this year. I have always been focused on this alter ego avatar central figure. And as I was making the work and reading a lot, I realized I wanted to expand on some of these accessory characters and create these sort of totem monolithic female characters. So I wanted to kind of give that feeling by creating that very long, narrow canvas. So thinking about spiritual versus religious, I just wanted to create a space that could hold the multiplicity of my identity, that could hold being a first generation American, having a Haitian lineage, but a lineage that was sort of washed over by a New England version of Christianity, really deeply entrenched in the apocalypse. So thinking about what happens in the moments that we can't see and wanting to create that other world. So I see the works as being like a different kind of spirituality. The spirituality is in the paint, it's in the brushstrokes, it's in the color, which is a language all in itself. I'm obsessed with the idea of creating something that you want, right? Like if you can't see it, if you can't access it, create it for yourself. And so I see the works as spiritual, but also so much more. I want for every Black woman, every Black femme, every person who is maybe not in the mainstream to feel like they can be everything that they are. And take up space in all the areas and not feel like they're stuck in boxes. And so creating this work and creating another world allows me to create my own type of spirituality that's in the paint.
Absolutely. I want to pivot, Elliot, to talk a little bit about worship and space making within your work as you present it at PS1 in this moment. So I know that you had mentioned Timothy Dean and Jamel Moore, and we're holding space and honoring them in the room today. The trial of Ed Buck begins in January 2021, and so this piece, Supernumerary, as presented in multi-channel form, and the text that accompanies it, which I encourage all of you to please read because it is so incredible, titled In an Attempt to, that you share as part of the show is timely and urgent. And the way that we are participating in this question or kind of exploration of body and body worship is by physically walking into a skin of yours. We walk into this piece called Hue, which is the color on the wall. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, what that means for you, to address head on what this kind of question of sensationalism, but also maybe too, where that intersects with kind of memorialization, honoring those who are not with us, and, in specific, making space for Black queer bodies.
For sure. And I think one of the first things I just want to say again, that I'm so grateful that you brought up the word worship. I just want to speak it and hear it and kind of let it ring out, because it's such an important word. The text that you mentioned as well, that's in the video supernumerary that's on this screen on the left-hand side right now, is available at mo.ma/Elliot Reed. You can read it in full online, but it's also in the gallery. I think my work in general, and I'll speak in general because it kind of will link back to the work in the show, is sort of it's about animating binds. I believe that my work as an artist is sort of to illuminate questions that I have. It's a way for me to externalize conversations that I have, like in my studio, whether it's like in my journal or in my drawings, or conversations I have with peers of mine, and sort of trying to find a way to externalize that. So although I am honoring the legacy of Timothy Dean and Jamil Moore, I think that more so I'm pointing to a sort of unanswerable question, which is, how do you bridge the authentic and the synthetic, which like on a deep felt and kind of like somatic level is something that I'm engaging with every day. And I think that a lot of us are engaging with every day. I feel that there's a really deep shift happening in the way that we kind of navigate relationships and communications with others. And although I am pointing to a real court case, I think that this work does have a slightly larger kind of almost universal quality to it, to talk about the ways that humanity is changing. I hope that doesn't sound like too big or catastrophic, but I'm not wallowing in the negativity, but I'm just trying to find a language to deal with what it means to be a breathing, feeling, loving person that's sort of dealing with the media assault, but also trying to create a space that feels authentic through the internet, which is just a corporately mediated platform. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I just want to suss that out a little bit, because I so appreciate that, we are operating both on and offline within, these sort of institutional spaces, these corporate spaces, and having to figure out a way to mediate our bodies that are surveyed in these spaces, mediate our bodies that are circulated in these spaces, and to think through the economy of that as you said, right, as somatic beings, as beings that, are carrying with us so much, and loving so deeply, right, so deeply sentient, caring beings. And I do feel like there's a really incredible connection here across all. I'm thinking about that, as tied to color specifically. In Naudline's work, there is such an expansion of color, the relationship between both sort of fire and water, and how that is expanded. In E's case, we see this kind of color, this sort of purple hue, which of course takes on a certain kind of sort of narrative that I'd love for you to speak on in a moment. And then Elliot, in your case, right, I want to come back to this sense of the walls, right? Because that in itself is so important to our initial touch point of your work. So can you each speak about, the role color plays, perhaps starting with you, E, because I know that this color has sort of traversed across your practice. It's like almost your signature color, but of course has, some really important political roots as well.
Sure. I just like to start to say that, like, Elliot, it's a joy to hear you talk about the walls in your space, and it just opens the work up so much for me, and like that rich brown. I don't know. I had to give a moment of praise for that real quick. but yes, so purple, lavender specifically, which actually the neon's actually creating that color, and the neon is a violet. So it's like, I think a lot about hues of purple and like hues of pink and like colors that extend from this palette. I use it in my collages for Lavendra. I think about it in the lighting for Lavendra, and now I've been thinking about it for this neon project with using this violet color and thinking about them being these purple lights shining. And the color violet for me, or the color lavender and the color purple, all extend out of Alice Walker's Womanist Definition, where she talks about lavender in relation to feminism and womanism, and like lavender and purple having a similar connection as womanism to feminism, which I understand is like talking about like feminism being an extension of womanism. Like womanism is this anti-feminism in the sense it's like bigger and older in a sense than feminism, which I deeply agree with. And I think that a lot of Black women think through this color in relation to that manifesto, but then also in terms of colors that look good on our skin. Like purple is a color that looks really, really good on brown skin. It just is. Like I've gotten critiques for this in the past, with people being like, well, it's just a nice color. It's like, it is. But for some reason, it looks really, really good with brown skin. And for some reason, my eyes, like I do have on eyeshadow right now.
I see it.
When I was a child and I did not, that color was always prevalent under my eyes because of the way my eyes darkened. It just always looked like there was purple there. And so purple always became this like safety color for me, about like just color where I fit. It automatically creates a space, I think, these purple spaces where I feel like I fit in.
Mm. And Naudline, can you talk a little bit about the way that color expands certain narratives? Because I do think, this notion of fitting in, the color that you sort of employ within these different works does some of that. It helps us kind of, be held. It allows us perhaps to see ourselves in different ways, and also too, to engage in maybe a different type of tonality of Blackness too.
Yeah, I think firstly, color is a whole other language, and it's an intuitive process for me, which I enjoy. But it creates a sort of acknowledgement of the multiplicity that I feel like in my own existence. Like this character can be blue, purple, magenta, alizarin, crimson. There are so many colors accessible to her, and I think that's where like I'm starting out from. But in this work specifically, I was thinking a lot about fire and water. Fire has been present in the work previously as a compositional element, but also as a representation of purification and cleansing, passion, lust. But in this body of work, I expanded the color palette to include phthalo blues and greens, teals, to really dig into this idea of water as like a folkloric element that I was accessing through some of the readings that I was doing throughout the residency. And what's interesting to me is that on both those spectrums of the color palette, like the blues and also the warmer colors, you can still get that element of like destruction, purification, but also transformation. So yeah, the color goes hand in hand with sort of this message of change and rebirth. And that's how I feel about that color.
Elliot, can you talk about hue? I know that I brought this up before, but I want to really push you on it because it is such a special thing. And also because, automatically any visitor walking into your part of this exhibition becomes both a guest and an intruder. There's kind of an interesting relationship there. So can you talk a little bit about, what hue is specifically? Like, how did it come to be?
Oh my God, I'm smiling because like intruder is such a hot word. So thank you, Legacy, for saying that. Like, yes, you are intruding, but also it's totally topical because you're walking into my body. I think that if this was unclear before, hue is literally a machine took a scan of my flesh and this is the color that came out of it. So I went in, like had a digital color scan made of specifically my right hand, which is my dominant hand. It's where all my art comes from, this hand, and sort of it's stretched. So I mentioned this in the text, but I was thinking sort of kind of perversely about the way that my skin is stretched across the gallery. It's like a handbag or like a leather glove, right? It's like the color that is from me and of me and uniquely me is sort of like processed, digitalized, reproduced, and actually stretched. So even though it has this kind of like, chic, sort of like glossy appearance when it's like painted like this in the gallery. I think that it does point to something much darker, but also, you know, whatever. I guess there is like a little bit of warmth in there. Like there is like an embrace too. It's like I'm holding you, but also like in order for the skin to hold you, something else had to die in a way.
I so appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think as well, this relationship between, you know, life and death is something that, you know, we stand in line of in each of the spaces that you are kind of presenting, Jane, Naudline, and Elliot. And this actually, you know, allows me to pivot to one of our questions from the audience, who specifically they're asking about the relationship, but kind of between, you know, what we see and language. So this conversation being one that is quite poetic, all of you speaking so incredibly and so thoughtfully with such poetry about your work. So, you know, I'm wondering if you can each maybe think about that, the ways in which language specifically inform the visual. And this can be sound and music too. I'm looking at you too. You know, thinking about, you know, maybe moments where there are things written that we have drawn from.
I mean, I think, well, I don't think I know. I know that I read a lot during this residency and I took a lot of notes, and a lot of those notes, like for example, the large scale Misa poster is actually titled after a Saidiya Hartman quote from the essay for colored girls assembled in a riotous manner. And it's about this moment of like a protest that like breaks out, and she's like trying to describe their need to like scream and shout in this protest, which I'm actually co-teaching a class right now on performance at Harvard with my partner in our collective Scratch, and my students loved that essay and this moment of like uproar, and they're like the kids are all like 18 to like 25 who are like doing this protest. So I don't know. So text plays a huge part, because I'm thinking about the poetry of theory, I'm thinking about poetry, I'm thinking about music, and I'm trying to engage that in the work. And also I try my own hand at writing a little bit. I've tried my own hand at journaling. There's a journal entry in the in the mirror installation. If you look at the bottom of the mirror, that's like an excerpt for this like reflection that I made about being on tour in 2018 and like what that experience was like for me. So yeah, so text plays a huge part, and poetics plays a huge part in the work for me.
Naudline or Elliot?
I have to agree. I started the residency and I was like, I'm gonna read. And I read for the first few months, and I made that small painting that's on the wall. I started that. I completed it later, but I knew that I wanted to engage with the writings of Black women. And so the first book I read was In the Wake by Christina Sharp. And it really made me think about water in a way that was different to what I was doing before. And then I moved into more like fictional kind of writings, and that I started writing myself. And so text is super, super important. Even thinking about the titles of the works, I think it goes hand in hand, poetry, text, and also image making.
And Elliot, I know that text is so important in your work, but also as well, specifically, you've captioned the video work that you're showing, which is a performance. Can you talk a little bit about that and your experience too, and what it means to read that text aloud and really conduct, you know, this kind of collaboration as the lead of it?
Yeah, I think that, well, I guess I'll just start with what I was reading. One of my favorite books I was going through when I started the residency was The Delectable Negro, Human Consumption, U.S. Slave Culture by Vincent Woodard, which actually talks about the surprisingly well-documented history of cannibalism on the plantation. Fantastic read. It's super uplifting. If you have a beach trip planned soon, I recommend it. But I guess specifically about text, like something that I've been really struggling with or kind of interested in is the way that text is kind of like an impossible thing. Like it sort of has the ability to point towards what you want or what you're trying to express, but there's always a bit lacking. And I feel like it always either says too much or not enough. So this video that you can see right now, Supernumerary, it is subtitled, but if anyone's in the room, I guess for more than 5 minutes, they'll kind of see that I'm literally talking about some of the artworks that are in the space and flipping back and forth between the installation, also the research that I'm doing. And then the two wall works, which are called placeholder number 1, which is nudity, which is bright red. That is a killer pan. And then placeholder number 2, which is blood. Both of these works are actually powder coated aluminum kind of signs with a 3M reflective vinyl on top of it. And the concept with this text is sort of like isolating this word and sort of displaying it in a way where it becomes both invisible and hyper visible. And the two words nudity and blood are important to me because they both point towards not just violence, but sort of things that you can only see when an act of reveal or an act of violence has occurred, because we're all nude under our clothes, but the state of nudity only happens when one's clothes are removed. And we're all filled with blood, but you only see blood when an act of rupture happens. So I think these two things are great examples of sort of like how I'm not only using language as a tool in my artwork, but also kind of performing it as well and turning it into the artwork and using it as a way to inspire more making.
Definitely. I think it's a good moment to maybe pivot to think about, all of you so accomplished in this incredible moment. But we have a question from the audience about, a moment that you can remember, if you're thinking way back to the days of yore, when you first realized that you wanted to be an artist. What was that like? Do you remember a moment? Was it a moment even, or was it multiple moments? And, perhaps how that has influenced your journey to where you are now. This is a big question.
I can start unless you guys, yeah. Okay, so I didn't have much say in being an artist. I know it's a crazy thing to like say, but basically like I was studying art history in undergrad and I had to take art classes to graduate. And I put it off until my senior year because I said it's gonna ruin my GPA. And then I took art classes and it was the only thing I wanted to do. And it was like the only thing I felt good at. Like art was a place where I found a language for myself that maybe writing an essay could not. And after school, it was the only thing I was just like, I had a camera and I started taking pictures and then I had my first show. So yeah, it was this sort of thing where it just kind of snowballed out of like, this is the thing I'm deciding to commit to. This is the thing that I think that is accepting me the most, really. It was like art was accepting me. And so I decided to accept it back. And it gave me a voice, which was really great for me.
Naudline or Elliot, any early memories or even more recent memories?
Yeah, I was fully prepared to be a doctor growing up. Growing up in a, immigrant household, we had a couple choices, and I didn't really know that I had this capacity, but I knew I was different and I felt things and I knew I needed something to kind of cut through the mundane. And so I realized that I wanted to be an artist second semester of my freshman year in college, and it was terrifying because it threw my whole life in a tailspin. But I agree with E. I feel like I didn't have a choice. I feel like this is what I was made to do. I didn't have examples in that moment, so I made it up. And I just was like, I'm gonna trust and have faith that this is what I need to do. So, yeah.
And before we pivot to our next question, Elliot, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with both E and Naudline in the fact that this is like the only thing I feel like I could have done. But something I really loved what Naudline said earlier about sort of like what you're reaching at through the characters that you're creating in your paintings, sort of creating an image that you feel like doesn't exist, sort of putting yourself into the art and to be seen. I think that I also was lacking in people that looked like me and the kind of art that I wanted to make. I mean, I dropped out of art school after 1 year. I remember one critique that really hurt was that like my work was too sentimental, which was like very off-brand at School of the Arts of Chicago in 2009. All love though. But yeah, I think coming from music, like my grandmother taught me how to play the piano. She was the organist at the church that I went to as a kid. Was the first time that I got to be creative. And then I was touring electronic music for years, very DIY. And I think that applying to art school, wanting to be a contemporary artist, dropping out of art school, making music independently where it's sort of like you could do whatever you wanted as long as you can make it with your own hands, and going back into art and then realizing that the rules don't actually matter was super helpful, especially in sort of like asserting an image for myself that I didn't see reflected. Because, you know, if I wanted to make, I was going to be really mean to minimalist painters, so I'll stop. But if I wanted to make something that was like more like set in the canon, there's so many examples I could have looked at. But I think music, and particularly like DIY culture, like the noise scene, the punk scene, and just like being able to tour on my own was really what gave me the confidence to transition back into the contemporary art space and be like, if I can make it, it's real. And once it's up, no one can tell me it didn't happen.
Incredible. Well, as a final question, just to kind of recognizing time, and I know we have some closing remarks, I wanted to have each of you reflect on this idea of longing vessel. This longing vessel, the name of the exhibition. I know that, you know, during this time, there has been lots of longing, you know, in the sort of growth of this moment and the challenges of this moment as we have navigated, but also like kind of surprising joys, right? Coming out on the other side of those things. And this was the title that you picked before all of this happened. So, you know, there's been this interesting time travel that has happened in the course of this that actually brings a sort of different resonance to the title of the show. Can each of you reflect a little bit about, you know, what that longing is, most particularly because it, you know, relates, Elliot, as you said, to the somatic, you know, thinking about the sonic, Naudline, thinking about these different types of kind of protections or enclosures. What does longing and this longing vessel mean to you?
I think about the day that we sort of brainstormed this title. The three of us like huddled around this like small table at Studio 127. And we were just there, like, just talking, thinking about everything that was going on at the moment. And we had no idea what this year was going to give us, right? And I think about that title and how it just is so right for this moment. For me in this year, longing has been about protection. It's been about safety. It's been about love. It's been about fantasy and imagining another place. And so that's where I'm approaching the word longing for touch, longing for tenderness. And I felt it then, and I feel it even more now, given this year. But yeah, longing is a huge word, and I'm glad that it's in the title.
I really relate to what Naudline was saying about longing in relation to safety. I've been thinking a lot about safety over the years in relation to Black women and femmes, and like, I think like in like all of our practices, we're thinking about like how, like, what does it mean for a Black body to be safer? Like safety's in the word. There's a conversation about safety and pain and like being hurt, and like I think for me, longing is the space of like longing for this space of acceptance, of protection, longing in the space so that you can like, but also longing that your body can do things that feel beyond you. I think for me, choreography was this thing where like I haven't danced since I was like 12, or like I get maybe, no, 17 or so. But still, like, I haven't like learned a full-on so like learning choreography, or like thinking about like Diane Carroll. Like at the time I was just working on the Let Me Be a Woman video in the beginning, which is Diane Carroll being like, I wanted this, talking about winning, and is the Emmy, a Tony, she won a Tony, and she's like, you know, I wanted this, I really wanted this, and there were no roles for her. She's talking about how there were no roles for her. They wouldn't give her any roles. They said a Black woman couldn't fit these roles. And then this director wrote a role for her, and she was able to win a Tony off of this role as this leading actress. And so it's just like, you know, like this idea, like, what does it mean to like want to be seen so badly, want to be this thing so badly? Like that's where longing is coming from for me in the work right now.
What about you?
Yeah, and I'll hop in with just two quick points. So I think we really did an amazing job with titling the show as like a title that kind of like links across like all three of our practices. And I just want to like highlight the word vessel. So a vessel is an object that is designed to be filled. However, it's at its greatest potential when it's empty. Just want to let that ring for a minute. And then also, as an aside, I always just imagine the title of our show sung in the melody of this magic moment. Every time I walk into the gallery, I'm just like, this longing vessel. Okay.
I love that because, you know, it brings us to a perfect moment to close the evening. I want to say that I have been thinking sort of deeply and with so much joy about the moments across your residency where we were all able to both share space in physical space, but also digitally, as we had to just like make it work. And we are here now. So, you know, I do just want to mark this moment by saying thank you to each of you. It is such a gift and a pleasure and a joy to have had the opportunity to, really the honor, to collaborate with each of you. And just all of us here tonight are celebrating you in these next steps as we open this incredible exhibition. And so now I'm actually going to pass the mic to Kate Fowl, Director of PS1, for some closing remarks before we conclude the evening.
Hi everyone, and I'm not sure that closing remarks is really that apt after the incredible articulation that we've just been listening to over the last hour. I have to say that it's been an incredible honor to have the opportunity to meet with all of you and to learn more about your practice and to start to get to know you over the last year, and it has been quite a year. Thinking about what's so special about the Studio Museum in Harlem residency, artist residency, I think you've articulated it all tonight, insofar as you're all individuals that come to this moment or to the moment of the residency to think about your own practice and to stretch what it is that you want to do. But at the same time, you get to know each other in ways that is quite different, and you get to really start to kind of push like how you want to practice in conversation with other practitioners. And then to go through a pandemic in the middle of all of that, it's like the intimacy that has come up so many times tonight really is something that is like, I mean, I feel I was so moved when I walked into the shows for the first time. It's like, there is so much that you have put into this. You know, more than I think possibly any of you could have imagined, like that you've had to transcend to be able to get to this moment. So I want to say thank you to everyone, like Legacy, Yelena. I know how closely you've all worked together. Jody has like partnered with you from PS1. I want to say thank you to the Tom Slaughter Exhibition Fund. I want to say thank you to the Jacques and Natasha Gelman Foundation, because they've made it possible for us, alongside the PS1 Board of Directors, to collaborate. But what I want to say last, if not least, is to everybody that is listening to this, you have to come and see these works in person. It's like, I can't tell you what it's like to walk into these gallery spaces. It really is just, I mean, you get goosebumps. I promise you that. So the exhibition opens next Thursday on the 10th and it closes on March the 14th. So there's plenty of time. And if there's any problems, we will extend the show. It's like, if we have to shut down again, hopefully we won't, touch wood. But please, it's like you can book tickets in advance. It's free to anybody who's in New York, and it's pay as you want if you're not in New York. But it's mo.ma/PS1 tickets. And I promise you, you will not regret coming to see these shows. So thank you again to all three of you, Naudline, Elliot, E. It's been incredible having the chance to get to know you.